Have you ever stopped to wonder why you chase after that next promotion, that perfect relationship, or even just a flawless weekend, hoping it will finally make you permanently happy, even when part of you knows the feeling always fades away completely within a few days? The answer isn't something your brain is doing that you have almost no control over. The real answer might surprise you more than you'd expect. So let's dig into this together. Think about the exact moment you finally got something you spent months working for. Maybe it was the keys to a new apartment, or maybe the exact grade you needed to pass a brutal class. For about 20 minutes, your chest felt incredibly light. The air felt easier to breathe. You probably thought you had finally arrived and that you would never need anything else again. But by Tuesday morning, you were already annoyed by the traffic on your commute and stressing about an unread email. We treat that fading feeling like a flaw in the system. But what if you actually got what you thought you wanted? Imagine waking up tomorrow morning, and before you even open your eyes, you feel it. A profound, overwhelming sense of perfect joy. Not the kind of manic, temporary excitement you feel on a roller coaster, but a deep, vibrating contentment settling heavily into your bones. Your chest feels warm, your mind is completely quiet. The chemical that makes things feel rewarding has just locked completely into the on position, and it is never going to turn off. You lie there in bed. Usually, by 7 in the morning, a tiny spike of anxiety kicks in. You need to use the bathroom. You need coffee. You have to get to work or you will fall behind on your rent. That specific friction is exactly what pushes the blankets off your chest and forces your feet onto the cold floor. But today, the anxiety is entirely gone. The physical pressure in your bladder is definitely there, but instead of feeling like an urgent problem that needs solving, it just feels like a gentle, warm sensation. You do not feel any desire to fix it. You are perfectly happy exactly where you are. Because if you didn't already know, the chemical that makes things feel rewarding is not actually a reward for finishing a job. It is the bait that keeps you walking forward. It requires a gap between where you are and where you want to be. Hours pass. The clock on your nightstand clicks past 9, then 10, then noon. Your phone starts vibrating on the wood table next to you. In the old world, a ringing phone from your boss would trigger a tiny spike of dread. Your heart rate would jump, your stomach would tighten. You would grab the phone just to make the uncomfortable feeling go away. But today, the phone vibrates, and it sounds like beautiful music. You watch it slide slightly across the surface, admiring the way the light catches the cracked glass screen. You feel immense love for the person calling you, but you do not pick it up. Reaching out your arm would require breaking the absolute tranquility of lying perfectly still. Why would you change a single thing about a moment that already feels like paradise? By 3 in the afternoon, your stomach begins to physically empty out. The biological signal for hunger fires off, sending a loud message up to your brain that says, "We need calories right now." Normally, this translates to irritability and a frantic search through the kitchen cabinets. But with your reward system locked permanently on, the hunger signal arrives and gets completely drowned out by a tidal wave of serene bliss. Your stomach is literally eating itself, and you simply smile, watching the dust motes float quietly in the sunlight. You have been awake for 8 hours, and you have not moved a single inch. When you finally sit down on the couch after a grueling 8-hour shift on your feet, the deep pleasure you feel in your calves and lower back is not actually the softness of the cushions. It is the immediate, rushing absence of physical strain. Your brain is a biological machine built entirely on the principle of contrast. It only knows how to measure how good you feel right now by comparing it against how terrible you felt 10 minutes ago. It uses the shift from dark to light to figure out where you are. If you take away the dark completely, the measurement system shatters. Relief requires something to be relieved from. Out in the real world, the first 48 hours of this constant, unbroken joy look incredibly peaceful from the outside, but that peace is actually the sound of everything quietly grinding to a halt. In an apartment directly down the hall from you, a man sits at his kitchen table staring at a stack of unopened mail. 2 days ago, those envelopes would have triggered a tight, heavy knot in the center of his chest. The fear of debt, the threat of eviction, the deep shame of falling behind. That specific, heavy anxiety is the only reason he would normally rip open the envelopes and log into his bank account. But today, looking at the bright red warning letters, his chest feels perfectly light. He feels a profound, almost spiritual affection for the paper itself. He has absolutely no desire to pay them. You do not fix a problem that feels like a blessing. Think about the way your teeth feel when you first wake up in the morning. That slight, chalky film coating your enamel. Yesterday, that texture was a tiny, low-level irritant. It disgusted you just enough to force you to stand up, walk into the cold bathroom, and squeeze paste onto a brush. Disgust is not just an emotion. It is a hardcore survival mechanism designed to keep parasites and infections out of your body. But with your reward switch glued permanently in the highest possible position, that chalky feeling on your teeth no longer registers as gross. It just feels like another fascinating, beautiful texture in a universe completely overflowing with perfect sensations. By day 3, the physical reality of the human body begins to clash violently with this new mental state. Across your entire city, millions of people have not showered, changed their clothes, or brushed their hair. The biological smell of human sweat and unwashed skin starts pooling heavily in the hallways of crowded apartment buildings. In any normal timeline, stepping outside smelling like that would create intense, crushing embarrassment. You would hide your face. But embarrassment relies entirely on the fear of losing social status and being rejected by the group. When your mind is flooded with a golden, godlike level of inner peace, you do not care what anyone thinks about your clothes. The entire concept of social standing evaporates. Almost everything you do to maintain your life is driven by the urgent need to avoid a negative feeling. You do laundry to avoid feeling dirty. You go to the grocery store to avoid the sharp ache of hunger. You lock your front door to avoid the terrifying vulnerability of a break-in. Without the sharp sting of annoyance, shame, or fear, the basic daily upkeep of human existence completely loses its purpose. The man down the hall is now dangerously dehydrated. His lips are cracked and bleeding slightly onto his chin, but he is still sitting in the exact same wooden chair, smiling gently at his past due notices, feeling more successful and complete than any human being in the history of the world. The discomfort system that kept him alive has not just broken down, it is transformed into a perfectly quiet trap. By day 4, the quiet consequences of this mental paradise shift from passive neglect into active, irreversible destruction. To understand why, you have to look at the one biological mechanism we all hate the most, the one we spend billions of dollars trying to numb, avoid, and shut off entirely. Think about what happens when you accidentally touch a hot baking sheet pulled fresh from the oven. Before you even have time to form a conscious thought, your arm jerks back violently. You drop the pan, you swear loudly, and you run your hand under cold water. You do not think about doing any of this. The pain forces you to do it. Pain is actually a 2-step process. Step 1 is simply the physical data, the electrical signal traveling up your arm that says tissue is currently being damaged. Step 2 is the suffering. The suffering is the emotional demand your brain attaches to that data, screaming at you to fix the problem right now or you will die. The alarm bell rings in an empty room because today your brain is flooded with an infinite, unbreakable supply of perfect contentment. You are walking barefoot through your kitchen and you accidentally knock a glass off the counter. It shatters across the hard floor. You step forward, and a heavy, jagged shard slices deep into the arch of your foot. Normally, the physical shock would buckle your knees. The panic would set in. You would grab a towel, apply heavy pressure, and look for your phone. But with your reward system locked at the absolute maximum, that clear division between pain and pleasure completely dissolves. The electrical signal for severe tissue damage travels up your leg and hits your brain, but instead of triggering terror, it lands in a massive pool of pure joy. You feel the intensity of the cut. You feel the sharp, vibrating pressure, but it just feels completely profound. It feels like a deep, heavy massage. You look down at the bright red pooling on the white kitchen tile, and you feel an overwhelming, beautiful sense of gratitude. You sit down directly in the middle of the broken glass, entirely fascinated by the vivid colors and the warm sensation spreading across the floor. You do not reach for a bandage. You do not call for help. You have absolutely no desire to stop the bleeding, because stopping it would mean interfering with a moment that already feels flawlessly perfect. Across the globe, the entire concept of a medical emergency quietly vanishes. Hospital waiting rooms sit completely empty. Ambulances remain parked in their bays, their batteries slowly dying. It is not because humans have stopped getting injured or sick. It is because a ruptured appendix, a broken femur, or a massive infection no longer registers as a threat. In a quiet suburban neighborhood, a middle-aged man experiences the sudden, crushing chest pressure of a massive heart attack. In the old world, that heavy restriction in his chest would trigger a massive wave of pure panic. The brain part that handles fear would hijack his nervous system, forcing him to crawl toward a phone and beg for an ambulance. But in this new reality, as his heart muscle begins to suffocate, the man simply lies back on his living room rug. He feels the immense tightening weight in his chest, but he interprets it as an incredibly deep, comforting embrace. He feels more loved and more secure than he has ever felt in his entire life. He smiles warmly at the ceiling, feeling an absolute, untouchable tranquility, and he simply lets his heart stop beating. The physical defense system of the human species has entirely collapsed. We always believed that if we could just remove pain and suffering from the world, we would finally be free to live perfect lives. We never realized that suffering was the only thing standing between us and the quiet, completely willing destruction of our own bodies. To truly understand how terrifying this is, we have to look closely at a single person making a choice. Picture a 30-year-old woman named Elena sitting on the third floor of an old brick apartment building. It is 10 at night on day 4 of this new reality. A few floors down, someone dropped a lit candle onto a pile of unwashed laundry 3 hours ago. In the old world, the smell of smoke would have sent people rushing into the hallways, pounding on doors, dragging their kids and pets down the concrete stairwells. The fear of burning alive is one of the deepest, oldest instincts entirely hardwired into human biology. But tonight, the building is perfectly silent. Elena sits completely still on her green fabric sofa. The air in her living room is rapidly getting thick. A dark, heavy gray smoke is slipping underneath the bottom edge of her wooden front door. In a normal brain, the specific chemical smell of burning carpet triggers an immediate, massive release of survival chemicals. Your heart rate doubles in seconds. Your muscles flood with oxygen so you can sprint away from the threat. But Elena just inhales deeply. The toxic smoke hits the back of her throat, causing her to cough violently. But the physical act of coughing does not feel like choking. It feels like a deep, incredibly satisfying stretch. She watches the smoke pool across her ceiling, mesmerized by the fluid rolling patterns it makes against the white paint. She is completely fascinated by the destruction. Think about the last time your smoke detector chirped at 2 a.m. because the battery was low, and how that tiny sound filled you with completely irrational rage until you climbed a chair in the dark. To rip it off the ceiling, that rage is just your brain aggressively demanding a perfectly safe environment. When the main fire alarm in Elena's hallway finally trips, it blasts 120 decibels of piercing, high-pitched sound through the corridors. The alarm is specifically engineered to be physically painful to the human ear, so you cannot possibly ignore it. Elena does not cover her ears. She leans her head back against the cushions, letting the crushing wall of noise wash over her. To her, it sounds like the most complex, beautiful symphony she has ever heard. The loud vibration rattles her teeth, and the sensation feels absolutely incredible. The heat begins to push violently through the walls. The temperature in the room climbs past 100 degrees, then 130. Her body starts pouring sweat, trying desperately to cool her internal organs down before they begin to shut off. Your physical body will always try to save itself. She looks at the heavy front door. The white paint is bubbling and peeling away in large black flakes. The brass doorknob is glowing a dull, heavy orange. Elena's logical mind is perfectly intact. She is not hallucinating. She understands exactly what a fire is, and she understands that if she stays on this couch, she is going to die in a matter of minutes. She has a metal fire escape right outside her window. It is exactly 8 steps away. She could easily stand up, push the glass open, and climb down to the cool night air of the street. The option is entirely available to her, but standing up would require breaking this profound, overwhelming feeling of absolute peace. It would mean taking action. Action requires you to want something to be different than it currently is. Elena looks at the window, then she looks back at the bright flames slowly eating through her door. She feels an immense, unconditional love for the heat. She does not want to leave it. As the heavy black smoke banks down to eye level, suffocating the last remaining oxygen out of the room, Elena takes one final, slow breath. Her lungs burn fiercely, sending massive spikes of raw damage data up her spinal cord, which her brain immediately converts into an explosion of pure euphoria. She smiles warmly. As the room goes entirely dark, feeling nothing but total perfection as the fire finally reaches her. By the morning of day 5, the sun comes up over a world that has almost entirely stopped moving. When you look out your window, the streets are not filled with chaos or rioting. Rioting requires anger. Looting requires a desperate need for resources you do not currently have. Both of those actions demand a massive gap between your current physical state and your desired state. But there is no gap anymore. Everyone has already arrived at the absolute peak of human satisfaction. So, the streets outside your window are just eerily, perfectly quiet. To understand how fast a modern city dies, without the friction of human dissatisfaction, you have to look at the invisible layer of suffering that keeps the lights on. Think about a long-haul truck driver running a route overnight. In the old reality, driving an 18-wheeler at 2 a.m. is a brutal, physically exhausting experience. Your back aches, your eyes burn from staring at the yellow lines. The only reason a human being voluntarily subjects themselves to that level of isolation and physical fatigue is the anticipation of a paycheck, which is really just the fear of starvation and homelessness. But today, that fear is entirely gone. A driver hauling 40,000 pounds of fresh produce down a dark stretch of highway suddenly realizes the heavy vibration of the steering wheel feels like pure magic. The low hum of the diesel engine is the most comforting sound in the universe. He does not need to get to the grocery warehouse. The warehouse is the future, and the future completely ceases to matter when the present moment is already flawless. So he simply takes his foot off the accelerator, the massive truck coasts to a gentle stop on the soft dirt shoulder of the highway. He turns off the headlights, leans his head against the cold glass, and stares up at the sky. He will never turn the key in the ignition again. The food in the trailer will slowly rot, and he will feel completely at peace smelling it. Within 48 hours, this exact same quiet paralysis hits every single critical system holding human civilization together. In a regional power grid control center, a massive digital map covers the entire front wall. Usually, an operator sits at a desk watching for red warning lights, fueled by a heavy mixture of caffeine and the terrifying responsibility of keeping electricity flowing to millions of homes. When a node turns red, it means a substation is failing. It means hospitals are going to lose power. In a normal brain, that red light triggers a massive spike of adrenaline, forcing the operator to type frantically and reroute power immediately. Now, the operator sits at the desk, completely overwhelmed by a heavy, euphoric stillness. A red light blinks on the board. Then 3 more. Then 50. The power grid is actively collapsing, cascading from one overloaded substation to the next. But the operator does not touch the keyboard. The flashing red lights look incredibly beautiful. They look like a holiday display. He feels a deep, unconditional love for the failing system. He feels absolutely no urge to intervene, because intervening implies something is broken. Nothing is broken. When the electricity finally cuts out, plunging the control room and half the continent into total darkness, the operator does not panic. He just smiles into the pitch-black room, profoundly grateful for the sudden, absolute quiet. We always thought human civilization was built on pure ingenuity and the noble desire to build a better tomorrow. We never realized that the entire concept of tomorrow only exists because today is slightly uncomfortable. Every bridge, every hospital, every power plant was built to solve a problem. They were built to shelter us from the cold, to cure the pain of disease, to push back the dark. When you permanently remove the discomfort of the cold and the terror of the dark, the motivation to maintain those massive physical structures vanishes instantly. The entire physical world we built is essentially just a giant, complex machine designed to manufacture temporary relief. When relief becomes permanent, the machine simply powers down. You are sitting in your living room. The water in your pipes stops flowing. The radiator goes freezing cold. The food in your kitchen starts to spoil. You have no way to call for help, and even if you could, no one would ever answer. And the most terrifying part is that as your physical reality crumbles into complete ruins around you, you have never felt happier. Think about the exact moment you realized you truly loved someone. It probably wasn't when you were laughing together at a crowded restaurant. It was probably a moment when they were terrified, or sick, or grieving, and you felt a sudden, massive physical weight drop right into the center of your own chest. You wanted to take their pain away. That heavy, uncomfortable weight is empathy. Empathy is literally your brain simulating the suffering of another human being, so you're actively forced to help them survive. But you can't simulate a pain that no longer exists. By day 6 of this unbroken perfection, the physical silence in the world is absolute, but the silence inside human relationships is much worse. Imagine sitting across from the person you've loved for 10 years. In the old reality, your connection was maintained by thousands of tiny, invisible acts of emotional rescue. Asking how their day was, rubbing their shoulders when they looked exhausted, reassuring them when they felt insecure about a comment someone made. These are micro repairs. They only happen because you're constantly scanning your partner for tiny signs of distress. Now, you look across the kitchen table at them. The table is covered in dust and empty water glasses because neither of you has moved to clean it. You look into their eyes, waiting to feel that deep, complex pull of shared history. Instead, you just feel perfectly fine. They look back at you, and they also feel perfectly fine. There is no distress to soothe. There is no insecurity to reassure. The entire emotional transaction that keeps two humans tightly tethered together has completely evaporated. They slowly stand up from the wooden chair. They tell you they're going to walk out the front door and never come back. Usually, hearing those words would cause your stomach to completely drop out. Your heart rate would explode. You'd stand up, block the door, and beg them to tell you what went wrong. The sheer terror of abandonment is the painful glue that forces humans to compromise, apologize, and stay together. You watch them walk away. You don't reach out. You don't ask why. As the heavy door clicks closed behind them, you don't feel a single drop of grief. Grief is really just the brain's way of violently protesting the loss of a critical survival resource. But you don't need them to survive anymore. You're completely overflowing with an infinite, self-contained joy that requires absolutely nothing from the outside world. You're sitting entirely alone in a dark room. The person you built your entire life with is gone forever, and you've never felt more incredibly satisfied. This is how the human species actually fractures. It doesn't end in a massive, chaotic war over resources. It ends in billions of perfectly isolated, silent bubbles of contentment. We always thought that achieving universal happiness would bring us all completely together. We imagined a future where everyone held hands and finally understood each other. We completely misunderstood what drives people together in the first place. We only hold hands because we're afraid of falling. When the fear of falling is permanently removed, the hands simply let go. You stop calling your parents. You stop checking on your aging neighbors. A mother hears her baby crying in the next room, but the sound no longer triggers that sharp, agonizing spike of maternal panic. It just sounds like beautiful birds singing outside a window. She lies quietly in her bed, feeling immense, unconditional love for the universe, while the deep biological connection to her own child quietly dissolves into nothing. The ability to feel another person's pain was the only thing that made them real to you. So the real question isn't how long the human race would physically survive if we somehow managed to eliminate all of our psychological suffering. The real question is what it actually means that every single thing we value about being human requires the constant, looming threat of losing it. And that question has a much more uncomfortable answer. For thousands of years, we have treated happiness like a final destination. We convinced ourselves it was a physical place we could eventually reach if we just made enough money, found the exact right relationship, or fixed enough of our broken mental habits. We thought joy was our natural state, and that pain was simply an unfair interruption. But the fundamental truth hiding underneath human biology is exactly the opposite. Pain, hunger, anxiety, and the profound, heavy fear of being alone are the baseline. They are the absolute factory settings. Joy was never designed to be a permanent residence. It's just a temporary chemical bribe, a brief compass needle pointing you toward the specific things that will keep your physical body functioning for one more day. If you look at the planet 3 weeks after the reward system locked into the permanent on position, you don't see a beautiful utopia. You see a completely silent graveyard bathed in absolute bliss. The massive physical infrastructure of the modern world is quietly rusting away. The global power grids are entirely dead. The underground server farms have gone completely dark, and the empty highways are slowly being reclaimed by the weather. The last few remaining humans are sitting exactly where they were when the fresh water finally ran out. They are entirely starved, severely dehydrated, and smiling up at the ceiling with perfect serenity. There is no art being made to capture the beauty of this final moment, because art requires a desperate, painful need to be understood by someone else. There is no music playing, because music is essentially just mechanical tension, desperately searching for a release. The world is entirely peaceful, but it is completely and utterly empty. The human story just stops, not with a massive, chaotic explosion, but with a quiet, highly satisfied sigh. We are creatures built entirely out of friction. So tomorrow morning, when your alarm goes off and you feel that heavy, familiar resistance in your chest, when you sit in traffic and feel that tight spike of irrational annoyance, when you look at your bank account or think about a conversation you messed up, and that cold, heavy knot of anxiety forms right behind your ribs, don't treat those feelings like a massive failure of your mind. Don't view them as a terrible disease you need to completely cure. That specific, annoying friction is the only reason you're going to put your feet on the cold floor. It's the only reason you're going to drink a glass of water, lock your front door, check on the person sleeping next to you, and walk out into the world to participate in human civilization for another 24 hours. The discomfort you spend every single day running away from is not the obstacle blocking you from a perfect life. It is the heavy, grinding machinery generating your entire existence. You are only capable of experiencing profound love because you are absolutely terrified of profound loss. The cage we spend our whole lives trying to escape is the only thing keeping us alive. This is a hypothetical scenario. Real outcomes would depend on factors no model can predict.